Welcome to Embracing the Fight, the podcast where we talk about healing, growth, and what it really means to fight for your emotional, mental, and spiritual well being. And if you haven't already, please take a moment to click like, to comment, to share any episode that you see concerning Embracing the Fight. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, X, and guess what? The difference is on Instagram, it's embracing the fight underscore. Because someone had the, bright idea to be embracing the fight too, and they beat me to it on Instagram. But otherwise, everywhere else on social media, you find me at embracing the fight. And if you didn't know, I'm your host, Erica Lamar. And today's episode, is one that, hits truly close to home for me. And I'm sure it does for many of you that are listening, many of us, especially the leaders, the entrepreneurs, the parents, the caregivers, the high achievers, and, the ones that everyone thinks, absolutely have it all together. There's, nothing wrong, nothing going on. So today, guess what we're talking about? We are talking about when high functioning doesn't always equal being healthy. You see a person that's running around and doing everything and trying to be everything. And, they are pretty successful, but it's not the way that things should be. Because if you're the person who always shows up, always performs, always pushes through, no matter what, this episode is for you because you are that high functioning individual that I speak of. You're the one that at the end of the day, your cup is totally empty. Sure, looks like you're highly accomplished, but what does it do to your mental health? What does it do to your physical and emotional well-being? What happens when you overextend yourself because you are high functioning? So I'm glad you asked, what does high functioning really mean? You have to really, start with that question because a lot of people, when they hear high functioning, they automatically think about autistic people, ones that can do much more than the others. And that's not necessarily the definition that we're going for today. For many of us, high functioning has a look. So what does it look like? Well, it looks like getting up every day, no matter, what you had going on, no matter how tired or how broken you actually feel. When you are running your business, and if you're not necessarily running it, you're building it, you're leading teams, you're parenting, you're caregiving, and at the same time, you're achieving a degree. Everybody looks up and you got an MBA or PhD, and you're doing all these other things. And then you get promotions and accolades. And then when people see you in public, you have this, humongous smile on your face. And you're really, really, truly breaking down, in private. That smile is a mask. Why is that? Society praises, high functioning people. We call them strong. We call them resilient. We call them inspirational. And then, who doesn't want to be called those things? Who doesn't want to be high functioning? But there is a truth behind all of that. High functioning is strictly about performance. Being healthy is about your well-being. And they're not the same thing. People try to equate them, to being the same thing. So you can be productive, and still be traumatized. Because think about it, you work somewhere and you're doing everything you can, the best you can, and people are still beating you down and talking to you crazy. You productive, but you're being traumatized. You can be successful and still be depressed. You can be respected and still be exhausted to the core. Your poor soul is struggling because of what you're trying to keep up with as far as being high functioning is concerned. You're not looking at your health and your well being at this point. You are looking at being productive and how people perceive you. And that, sadly, is a characteristic of a high functioning person. So then what happens? That person goes into, survival mode. And, survival mode or survival strategy is not necessarily, a sign of wellness. It's truly a sign of, just getting by, of just making ends meet, making things happen. And for many of us, being high functioning starts off, actually as a metric or a method of protection. Think about it. We learned to perform because we had to survive. We didn't learn how to perform because, oh, this is the best thing, around. This is what you should do. You learn how to be strong because no one else was. It's like you're the one who's picking up the pieces. You're the one who's making sure that everything goes through. You learn how to push through because you know what? Stopping was not an option for you. So it's not like high functioning is a choice. It's a need, it's a necessity. You do it because it has to be done. So where does it come from? Now, I'm not a psychiatrist or anything like that, but I'm under the guise, or I believe that it could come from childhood trauma, poverty or instability, emotional neglect, military or corporate pressures, or cultural expectations to be the best, to be the brightest, to be the strongest. You didn't become that way, or you didn't become highly functioning or high functioning because, life was perfect and life was easy and life was grand. No, you became high functioning because you had to, because you needed to, because there was no one else that could take up the reins quite like you could. So it kind of fell in your lap, and you had to do what you had to do to keep things moving. Because, sometimes when the world stops, that's when everything collapses. You think about, how Earth spins on an axis. Imagine if Earth were to just stop, how everything would fall. So sometimes we just have to keep spinning. So what happens when that happens? You start to see signs that you're highly functioning, but you're not necessarily healthy. So let's talk about some of those signs, because you know what, we may dismiss them, as something else, and then we might, go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, oh no, you're just tired and you don't believe it. For instance, chronic exhaustion. You're always tired. You wake up and thinking about nothing but coffee, nothing but, you know, Red Bull. But you're tired, you keep going. You get time to rest sometimes, but your body never, truly feels restored. And then there's emotional numbness. Now that is something that I honestly dealt with. It's where you don't cry. You don't celebrate too deeply. You just kind of, exist in that neutral zone. You just kind of stay middle of the road. You're glad that you're alive and breathing, and you're glad that you're moving, but that's about all. You're just kind of existing. And then another is overachievement as an identity. You ever hear those people that are always spouting off about their degrees and the cars that they have and the things that they do? It's because their work is tied to their productivity. And if they're not producing, they feel worthless. That's a highly functioning individual. Also, another sign, you find yourself with the inability to rest without guilt. Like, for instance, feel like resting, is uncomfortable. Silence appears to be scary. So you stay busy to avoid feeling, that emptiness. And if you're the only one that's not moving, you're like, dang, I'm just riding the clock, or dang, I'm not doing anything to grow my business. That's not it. Another sign, isolation. You're surrounded by people, but you feel, emotionally alone. You're the one who's always helping to really ask for help. And you just feel, that loss every time. And then there are some physical symptoms that you should pay, attention to. So you start to get these random headaches. You start to have stomach issues. Your muscles are tired, or you're always very, very tense and you can't sleep. You have, insomnia. Your body speaks, what your mouth won't say or what it can't say. If any of these, resonate with you, guess what? You're not alone. You're not broken. You're overloaded. Call a thing a thing. Not only are you overloaded, but you're under supported. Because if you had the support, guess what? Your load would lighten. You would not have to worry about being the end all and be all to help and to do everything. You have to learn, how to ask for help and who to ask for help. So we often can confuse, high functioning with healthy. Because let's look at, say, baby boomers. They were the people that work, sun up, sun down. And now the product of that, I believe, is that we live in a purpose-driven culture. So you think about it, we celebrate the hustle, the grind, the people who are getting out there, making things happen, getting it done. And then, companies celebrate the no days off. People, oh, they didn't take a vacation. Oh, they didn't do a holiday. They didn't do this, they didn't do that. They worked. Or they worked through burnout, when you are at the end of your rope, but you're still there, you're still working, you're still pushing. And then you look at being busy as a badge of honor. I'm not talking about a person walking around with a show looking busy. I mean, the person's actually busy. But the thing is, we celebrate all those things, but we rarely celebrate having boundaries, saying no, getting some rest, being emotionally honest. When somebody asks you how you are, you really tell them how you're doing. You don't say fine. You tell them you're struggling. You tell them you need help. We don't celebrate therapy. We don't celebrate saying no. Man, you tell somebody no, they ready to fight. They angry, upset. They want to write you off as a friend. Terrible. So this is why we learn, to confuse success with wellness. We assume that if someone is functioning, whether it's high or low, that they're fine. It's like, okay, they're moving. They getting it done. They might not be, at the highest level of health, but they're getting it done. Because they don't realize that functioning is not the same as flourishing. When you think of something that flourishes, think of a plant. If you water it and you feed it as you should, you'll see how beautiful it is and how it flourishes. But if you don't put any water on it or spend any time with it, it might be alive, but it's not flourishing. Did you know, though, that there is a cost, a huge cost, of being high functioning without healing? So let's talk about that cost. I don't mean like in dollars and cents. I guess, yeah, it could be in dollars and cents because if you experience burnout, guess what happens? Your mind and your body eventually shut down. And when it happens, sometimes you have to go to the hospital. Sometimes you have to, get some medication. You have to do things to help yourself get back together. Because you know what? Burnout doesn't ask for permission. It just comes in and it takes over. And you have to deal with the aftermath of burnout. It's not like you say, oh, burnout, I got to stop. No. Then next, there's like relationship strain. High functioning people often struggle like with vulnerability. They can't necessarily talk to the people that they love. And you know what happens? Loved ones then start to feel like, they really don't want to be around me. They don't want me. And then they feel emotionally shut out. And that's not good because then you start to feel that stress as well. Then there's the identity crisis. So if your identity, is tied to your productivity, who you are when, there's nothing going on. I mean, who are you? I mean, do you just become nothing because you're not productive? I mean, what happens? That isn't healthy. That's emotionally draining. And then you start to see these health consequences. You got chronic stress that increases. And when that increases, guess what happens? It affects your heart. It affects your autoimmune or your immune system. You start to get these autoimmune disorders. You deal with depression, anger, and anxiety because you really don't know how to deal with this, physically because you're just functioning. You're highly functioning. You're just trying to get it done. And then the one that people, kind of miss is spiritual disconnection. Constantly moving, constantly doing, and never getting to, the quiet place can drown out your connection to your purpose, to God, and yourself. You don't just lose energy, you lose yourself. You get lost in the shuffle. And that isn't what I want for you. That isn't what we want for you here at Embracing Mobile. We want you to move from being high functioning to truly being your healthiest self. Now, you're probably sitting there saying, I've been this way for so long. So, how do I actually shift from just functioning to truly being healthy? Like, how do I do that? I haven't been able to do that this whole time. Well, give me some steps. First, you need to redefine strength because, when you're high functioning, you think strength is one thing, and it's really not. Strength is not pushing through pain. Strength is actually being able to acknowledge the pain and seek support. Because if you push through pain, guess what? It only gets worse. Next, you have to normalize rest. It's okay to take a break because rest isn't laziness. Rest is repair. It's restoration. And it's rebellion against the burnout culture. You have to put your little hand up. You have to say, hold on, I need a second. Give me a second. Take your 15-minute breaks. Take your 30-minute lunch, your hour. Do whatever you need to do. Then if you don't know how to voice that, then I suggest you seek some type of professional support. Because when you go to therapy, when you go to coaching or counseling, these are tools. They're not signs of weakness. They help you to talk through the things that you have an issue with, giving a voice to. So then the next thing that you can do is practice emotional literacy. So name your feelings. Call a thing, journal it, Pray about it. Talk about it. Cry. Feel. You have to expel it. You have to get it out of you. And then what you need to do, something that I have been so good at doing lately, is build boundaries. You have to truly know how to protect your time, your energy, and your peace. Like I said on one of my clips this week, no is a complete sentence. It requires no explanation, only a period. Next, you need to develop a support system. Find people who truly see you, the ones who see you beyond, your productivity, what you can do for them, how you can help. When they see who you are as an individual and they love you and treat you just the same. You don't want to find people who just know you for what they think you can do because they are part of the problem. They're the ones who don't believe that no is a complete sentence. So now let's just, take a moment to reflect on everything that's talked about. And then we'll do some affirmations. And then after that, I need you to do a couple of things. Okay. So let's close, with this reflection. Ask yourself, say, self, if I stopped performing today, if I stopped being a high functioning individual, who would I be? What would I need if I allowed myself to be honest? What would health look like for you beyond success? Just focus on those three questions. Just ask yourself. But then you have to look in the mirror, look yourself in the eye and say, I am worthy beyond my productivity. Rest is a part of my success. Healing does not make me weak. It makes me whole. I am allowed to slow down. I am allowed to rest. I am allowed to speak my truth. Affirm those things daily. Don't let that go. So, if this episode resonated with you, what I need you to do is share it with your friends, with your family, with someone who is always the strong one, always the go to person, always the one who never says no. And what I like for you to do is leave a comment below and tell me what high functioning has looked like in your life. Show me what you're going to do to change that. And you know what? I believe we all can do this together because I've had times when I have been high functioning, but I realized that it does nothing for me because guess what? If I pass away today, someone is going to take my place tomorrow in whatever it is that I'm doing. So you have to choose you. All right? Remember, you don't just deserve to function. You truly, truly deserve to thrive. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to watch this episode of Embracing the Fight. And as always, I want you all to have an absolutely amazing day.